Good morning, Skyline. How's everybody? It's good to see you. I know we do have some visitors with us this morning, and I'm glad that you're here. We do have several out. I know Jonathan and Paige will be out this Sunday as well as next Sunday, and so we'll have to remember them and all the others who are traveling in our prayers to bring us home safely. Speaking of traveling, Joyce and I will be leaving in 2 weeks, headed up to Seattle to visit our daughter, but I'll tell you more about that a little bit later. Well, we made it through the official, or I should say unofficial, start of summer. Memorial Day weekend's in the books, kids out of school. Hopefully some of the kids have gotten some interesting summer jobs that they can make a little bit of money at. I know summer sports in full swing because Joyce and I are having to tend to the grandkids, ferrying some of them here and there while their mom and daddy carry them here. We got camping trips, vacations, all being anticipated, and no doubt during this period of time, our families will feel the strain, okay? They'll feel the strain on their time, on their resources, schedules, nerves, because the kids have to be here, the kids have to be there, and then we got all of our adult stuff that we have to take care of. It's going to be hectic. It's going to be fast paced as it usually is. So this morning I want to take a little bit of time out and remind you of the importance, despite everything we've got going on. And we do. We all have a lot of important stuff going on. But despite everything we've got going on, I want to remind you the importance of keeping your proper priorities in life. It's summer vacation from school, all right, for our children. But it's not summer vacation from God for our families. And we have to remember that. We have to remember that. As parents, sometimes we may not be as strict, as we usually are, but we don't get to abandon our God-directed and God-given duties. We are commanded in Ephesians 6:4, raise our children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And you can't be haphazard about that. You can't mandate that they do this when they're in school, but during the summertime, say, we don't have to go to church on Wednesday night, et cetera, or Sunday. We can do this or we can do that. You can't do that. I know the kids stay up later watching TV. I know they're playing on the computer games. I know there are sleepovers with friends. I know there are various, you got soccer camp and baseball camp and Maywood, and you got all of these different camps coming up too. And all of which will place some pressure on our spiritual duties. Our Bible reading for the kids at night, our nightly prayers, maybe even attendance at worship. And too often our commitment to God, we'll say, becomes lost during the summer vacation. We cannot allow that to happen. We can't allow it to happen for our families, much less our kids. It's been said, things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of things which really matter the least. We've got to get it established in our mind. What is the most important thing in our lives? What's the most important thing to us being here? What's the reason for our existence? Jesus emphasizes a main point in Matthew 22:36. And really there is no question, who should have or what should have priorities in our life. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. Can we remember that? And if we remember that, how is that going to direct our actions? Will that motivate us to do things that we hesitate to do because of whatever? Will our love for God motivate us past our human carnal instincts? With your mixed up schedules this summer, as you travel on vacation, do not allow priority for God to slip. Don't do it. Parents, it's these times when kids may pick up or recognize on maybe a superficial love for God or a wishy-washy love for God. What do you allow yourself to cause you not to do what you know you should do? Your kids may pick up on it, and they too then will become wishy-washy. If you're not committed, believe me, they will not be committed either. They'll be able to see the priority that you place upon God in your life. Many people, unfortunately, believe that Jesus and God and all of that's just not worth the effort, quote unquote. And they give this idea to their kids, and then we ask, well, what's happened to our kids? Oh my goodness, what's happened? Well, it's easy. The kids are being raised without God in their lives. Surely we have time, a few minutes for God, first thing in the morning, in our prayers. And then we go about our lives during the day, talking to Him at various times. And then at night, surely we have time to thank God at the end of the day and then sleep peacefully. And two, when you're going to go on vacation, research the congregations along your route. And, take an interest in stopping and worshiping with those congregations. Joyce and I do this, and we have really met some interesting people along the way. And I've shared with you our last trip up to Idaho. We even met a man and woman who was from Clarksdale, Mississippi. And so we had a good visit about the Delta. And, plan on attending church. Take your Bibles. Take a Bible story book for the kids. And remember your prayers in the motel room, for breakfast, lunch, supper. If we are not careful in today's world, we will be molded because we are being exposed, okay? We will be molded as to what our morality is, what our decency is, what our integrity is, what our core values are. We will be molded by the TV set. We will be molded by the internet. We will be molded by people around us. Our kids will be molded by so-called friends of theirs. And so setting things in the right priorities is vitally important for the overall success of one's life. Not only spiritual life, but physical life as well, regardless of age. Parental examples will serve to teach other results. Many of you have taught me, and I hope I have taught and influenced you. The example set by children can also encourage us older folks as well. And I know many of our children here have certainly encouraged me, and I hope I have encouraged them. You see, over time, with God's help, our spiritual priorities hopefully will become ingrained in our lives, where we don't have to think about what we need to do. You need to raise your children where they already have an answer, all right? to the question of, if there's a ball game going on, do I go to the ball game or do I go to church? They shouldn't have to wonder about that. They shouldn't have to doubt. They shouldn't have to say, well, I wonder what mom or dad's going to let me do or make me do or whatever. You know, we should transfer our biblical priorities to our children, starting at a very, very young age. And I'm glad we have here started at a very, very young age to do that. Because following these priorities will have an impact, a positive impact upon their lives, all of their lives. And it will impact us as adults as well. And I hope we can agree that our love for God and our spiritual walk with God should be the most important priority within our lives. God has to be number one. It's got to be. When God gave the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, he thundered these words recorded in Exodus 20 and verse 3. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. God doesn't want anything. God does not want us to place anything before him, no matter what season, spring, summer, fall, or winter. It does not matter. He's got to be first. And his desire is that we worship him and worship him only, all during the year. Romans 12:1 talks about us presenting our bodies as a living and holy sacrifice to God. 1 Corinthians 6:20 says, for you have been bought with a price, therefore glorify God. It costs big time. It costs God big time. It costs Jesus big time. We should therefore show our love back to God. And if we don't prioritize our love, our lives, we will not be able to really show our love to God. It will hard to be a living sacrifice, because what will we be sacrificing? We're doing everything that we want to do. We're putting things that we want to do in first place. And God's dragging along behind us. What type of love does that show that we have for God? Within life, really, our spiritual direction and our commitment to God is really all that matters. All that matters. Remember King Solomon, discovered within his life in Ecclesiastes 12:13, after his search for the meaning of life. And he searched everywhere. He had everything to search with. He had everything to search into. You know, what is the meaning of me being here? What's the meaning? And King Solomon lists everything that he tried, and he tried everything there was on this earth. And he said, let us hear the conclusion of the matter. Fear God, keep his commandments. That's the priority. Because he says, for this is the whole duty of man. That's all that's going to matter. That's all. For us as adults, we have to understand that. We have to give that emphasis and priority, transfer that to our children so they will understand that too. Because as David said, I will go to be with my child who had died. I want us as parents to be able to go to be with our children as well. And I want our children to be able to come to be where we are. For this is the whole duty of man, to obey God. Fear God and keep his commandments. Do our lives, do our priorities, does our lifestyle, does what we teach our children, where we allow them to go, who we allow them to be around. Do these things reflect a fear of God and the keeping of his commandments? Sometimes I'm afraid they do not. They do not. Proverbs 9:10 tells us the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Yes, we need to get smart, and we need to get smart really quick once we understand what God will do to those who have not obeyed him. Yeah, we get really, really smart when we realize that God means business, okay, with our obedience to him. It's the beginning of knowledge. Proverbs 1:7 adds a little bit more. He said, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Joyce and I talked about that this morning coming to church. You know, these individuals, and it seems like we've got several here, and I was contacted yesterday regarding performing a funeral for one of the older members there in Rolling Fork. Not going to be able to this time, but you know, there's no doubt in my mind about that particular person. She's 93 years old, and she was as faithful as you could be up until her death. You know, what do people think about, okay, when they're laying on that bed and they know that they probably won't get up? You know, will that 15-point deer head mean anything? Will that 12-point bass, 12-pound bass mean anything? You know, we've got to get our priorities straight, because sooner or later we're going to be there. And I don't want you to lose your priorities for this summer. During this summer, we'll have more choices, decisions. We'll have complications. We'll have things that pop up that will make us have to think, okay, regarding what we need to do. In Luke 10, and I ask that you turn there with me, Luke 10, starting there in verse 38, the Bible tells the story of two sisters, Mary and Martha, who were loyal friends, okay, of Jesus. Both ladies were strong followers of Christ, and they loved him very much. Now, Christ visited their home, and it called for them to make a decision as to what they were going to do. Let's read together there, 10:38. Now, as they were traveling along, he entered a certain village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister called Mary, who moreover was listening to the Lord's word, seated at his feet. But Martha was distracted with all her preparations, and she came up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me. But the Lord answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things, but only a few things are necessary. Really, only one. For Mary has chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. The story is a classic example of setting priorities. Mary and Martha both had choices to make. They had the option of sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening, or cooking, setting the tables, cleaning, you know, all of that. Each sister made their choice, all right, as to what they felt they could do. Mary chose to listen to Jesus. Martha chose to be the proper hostess, let's say. And Jesus explained to Martha what the best decision in that situation would be. At that time, in that setting, what option, what decision would be the best? And Martha was told that she had gotten herself entangled, okay, in a whole host of things that really didn't matter. Martha thought that it was more important that the personal needs of everyone was of paramount importance. But for that moment, Jesus says, it wasn't. It wasn't. Now understand, serving others is very important. Serving others is a biblical idea of action. It is certainly not wrong, and it's certainly something that we should do. But the problem was setting a proper priorities for that moment. Over the years in different congregations, there have been instances where we have eaten at the church building, and prior to the end of worship service, let's say 5 to 10 minutes, there would be some ladies who would get up and go to the fellowship room. And they would proceed to ready the meal for the rest of us when service was ended. The intent was to serve, and it was very, very commendable, no doubt. The desire was to have everything ready for the rest of us when we finished worship service. Rolls would be hot, drinks would be ready, food would be neatly placed on the counter and arranged and everything. But to be able to do this, those ladies had to leave the corporate worship service. It wasn't over. Sometimes the preacher hadn't even finished preaching. They missed that part. They missed the exhortation. They missed the singing. They missed the last prayer. Decision time. Decision time. What's more important? What's more important? The worship service to God where he tells us to come together upon the first day of the week to worship him? Or whether I've got a hot roll or not waiting on me when I get in the fellowship room? What's the most important? Now, again, serving is very important. Helping is very important. But what's a delay of 5 minutes, even 10 minutes, for all of us to be together, you see? What decision would you think Jesus would find more appropriate? I think you know the answer to that. The Bible also records some examples there in Luke 9, 57. Luke 9, starting in 57. And as they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Now think about it. We don't hear anything from this guy anymore. This guy said, I'll follow you wherever you go. Maybe he has seen Jesus do all of these miracles. Maybe he has seen Jesus do all of these things. And he said, man, that's the man to be with. I might be able to maybe make some money along, with him or whatever. And then when Jesus says, man, I don't even have a house. I don't have a place to lay my head. That guy in his mind evidently thinks, well, man, if you don't have that even for yourself, ain't no way I'm going to get anything. So we don't hear anything from him anymore. Even though he said, I'll go wherever you go. What was his priority? What was his priority? And there in verse 59. And he said to another, follow me. But he said, well, sorry, permit me first to go and bury my father. And some individuals think this is pretty terse response here. But he said to him, allow the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim everywhere the kingdom of God. What's most important? What can that person do for someone who is dead at that time? Certainly help their family, yes. But you see, Jesus is trying to get them to Think about their priorities. And another also said, I will follow you, Lord, but first permit me to say goodbye to those at home. But Jesus said, no one, after putting his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. Priorities. I will follow you, Lord, wherever you go. Just not today. Just not today. I got some things I got to take care of. I'll be back to you. Okay? None of these excuses were in and of themselves wrong. However, Christ was trying to teach an important lesson. All of them came wanting to follow God. All of them came willing, but when it became time for where the rubber meets the road, they all bailed out. See, their priorities, they really hadn't thought through their priorities. And I want you to think through the priorities that you should have. They talked a good game. And sometimes we talk a good game too. But many times there's just no action. There's no action. There's another instance there in Luke 18:18 where it's called the ruler. There in Matthew it's called the young man. In Mark 10 it's called the rich. So if you put Luke, Matthew, and Mark together, we come up with the rich young ruler. All right, that's the person that came to Jesus wanting an attaboy for keeping the law. He wanted to be recognized for doing such a good job. He believed he had an excellent spiritual life. Jesus knew his heart, forced him to look at himself for what it really was. Sell your possessions and follow me. Don't sell your possessions and follow Satan. It's a decision. It's a difficult task many times. He made it. He wanted to keep his material goods. And then in Luke 14, if anyone comes to me and does not hate, we talked about that last week in Bible class, I think. Love less, all right, his father and mother and wife, children, brother and sisters, yes, and even his own life, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his cross. There's a decision that has to be made. And many of you had that same decision just like I did. Norman, do you love your mother more than me? God asked. And at one time in my life, I said yes. I love my mother more. That was wrong. It was wrong. And I came to realize that, and I talked with her about that, and she came to realize that as well. Do you believe or do you love anyone or anything more? What is stopping you from making God number one? And from our Bible reading, we're told Peter, James, and John, they left everything to follow him. They left everything. That's a pretty good priority there. Leave everything. Matthew 9 talks about Matthew was sitting in the tax office. Jesus said, come and follow me. Matthew didn't even give a 2-week notice. He probably didn't turn the lights out, locked the door when he left. He got up, followed him. Certainly his priorities are straight. What are your priorities this morning? Where do you place your values? Or how do you determine your values? At the end of the day, we choose and decide the source of our values ourselves. These values then become our priorities. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they chose to stand by their values that had already been set. All right. And I want you to already have set your values, your priorities. So when decision time comes for you, there won't be any doubt. There won't be any hesitancy. And there will not be any on the part of your children either. because your children will know what your priorities are, and that will be their priorities. I pray that the source of your values comes from the Word of God, and we impart those values to our children. We'll close with Ephesians 4:17. Basically, Ephesians 4:17 tells us to lay aside our old self. Okay. Lay aside our old self. God says, I want you to be renewed in me. And I want you to put on your new self. Your new self. Jesus says, even for himself, he says, Father, not my will, but your will be done. If for some reason we can help you this morning, one of the tenets of God's will is that we be baptized. We be immersed into water to come up that new person. We can help you in that today. We'd ask that you come forward. If we can assist you, if you have already been baptized, you're a member of the Lord's church, but you have failed to put Jesus, God, as a priority. If for some reason we can help you this morning, let it be made known now while we stand and sing.